The chamber was massive, circular, and cold. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the center, alone on a platform that hovered above the floor. Around her, arranged in a perfect circle, sat the representatives of the 12 most powerful species in the galaxy. Each sat in their specialized chairs, designed for their unique bodies. The lighting was dim, almost theatrical, casting long shadows across the metallic walls. Sarah had been standing there for 3 hours. Her legs ached. Her throat was dry, but she kept her back straight and her face calm. She had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times during the journey to Unity Prime Station. She had known, deep in her bones, that this day would not go well for humanity. The Vereen representative, Galactic, rose from his seat. His species looked like massive insects with 6 limbs and chitinous armor that gleamed under the lights. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation device as smooth and cold as ice water. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," Galactic announced. His mandibles clicked together between words. "Humanity has been found guilty of aggressive expansionism, dangerous adaptability, and unauthorized colonization of 17 disputed systems. These crimes cannot be ignored." Sarah felt her heart sink, but she showed nothing on her face. Behind her, she could hear the shallow breathing of her small staff. They had all hoped for a different outcome despite knowing better. "The sentence is as follows," Galactic continued, and Sarah could swear she heard satisfaction in his translated voice. "Humanity will abandon all colonies, stations, and outposts beyond the Sol system. You have 50 standard years to complete this withdrawal. Any human presence beyond your home system after this deadline will be considered an act of war." The words fell like hammers. 50 years. 200 years of human expansion, of building homes on distant worlds, of struggling and surviving in the darkness of space, all of it erased by a single sentence. Sarah thought of New Harmony, where her sister lived with her children. She thought of Proxima Station, where humans had built beautiful gardens under domed skies. She thought of the mining colonies in the outer reaches, where rough men and women had carved civilization from barren rock. All of it, gone. Furthermore, Galactic said, and Sarah realized with horror that he was not finished. "Humanity is hereby forbidden from accessing the Galactic Trade Network, the FTL communication grid, and all interspecies commerce. Your species will be isolated until such time as you have proven yourselves capable of peaceful coexistence." "This is a death sentence," Sarah said quietly. Her voice carried clearly in the silent chamber. "Without trade, without access to resources beyond Sol system, humanity cannot survive. You know this," a different representative spoke up. This one was from the Dalmari, a species that looked like ambulatory plants with vine-like appendages and a crown of flowering petals. Her voice was softer, almost apologetic. "Perhaps humanity should have considered survival before expanding so aggressively. You have pushed into territories claimed by other species. You have exploited resources without permission. You have shown no respect for the established order." "We asked for those territories," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "We submitted claims through proper channels. We waited for responses. When none came, we assumed silence meant consent." "Silence means patience," Galactic snapped. "Your species understands nothing of patience. You have existed in this galaxy for barely 3 of your centuries. Some of us have civilizations that span hundreds of thousands of years. You are children playing with tools you do not understand." Sarah wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that humanity had fought and died for every meter of space they occupied. That while these ancient species had grown comfortable and stagnant in their positions of power, humans had clawed their way up from a single planet with nothing but determination and ingenuity. But she was a diplomat. She had trained for this. She swallowed her anger and tried a different approach. "I request the right to appeal this decision," Sarah said formally. "Under Article 47 of the Galactic Charter, any species has the right to present additional evidence and arguments." "Denied," Galactic said immediately. "The Council has spoken. The decision is final and irreversible." "On what grounds do you deny our right to appeal?" Sarah demanded. "The Charter is clear." "On the grounds that humanity has proven itself unworthy of the protections offered by the Charter," another representative said. This one was from the Quelon, a species of gas bag creatures that floated in specialized tanks. You demand rights while ignoring responsibilities. You claim persecution while committing aggression. The Council has been more than patient with your species. Sarah looked around the circle, studying each representative. Most would not meet her eyes. A few looked uncomfortable. But Jothic stared at her with what she recognized as triumph, even across the gulf of species differences. This had been his goal from the beginning. She understood that now. The Vereen had wanted humanity removed as competition, and he had spent years building a coalition to make it happen. I see, Sarah said quietly. Then let me be clear about what you have done here today. You have not simply exiled humanity. You have created an enemy. Because we will not die quietly. We will not fade away into extinction. Humans do not surrender. Brave words from a representative of a species that will soon be extinct, Jothic said dismissively. Your bravado does not change reality. In 50 years, humanity will be nothing but a cautionary tale told to young species about the dangers of arrogance. You have made a grave miscalculation, Sarah said, her voice cold and clear. You assume that because we are young, we are weak. You assume that because we are small, we will break. You are wrong. Humans adapt. We survive. We overcome. And we remember those who wronged us. Are you threatening the Council? Jothic asked, his voice sharp. No, Sarah said. I am making a promise. You will regret this decision. Maybe not today. Maybe not in 10 years or 20 years. But someday you will look back on this moment and wish you had chosen differently. Remove her, Jothic ordered. The Council has no more time to waste on this primitive species. Security drones moved forward, their weapons powered but not raised. Sarah turned and walked toward the exit with her head high. Her staff followed, their faces pale with shock and grief. As she reached the door, Sarah turned back one last time. One more thing, she called across the chamber. You are redistributing our colonies among yourselves, correct? Dividing up the worlds we built, the stations we constructed, the resources we discovered. That is the prerogative of the Council, the Dalamari representative said. Those territories will be administered by species that understand proper galactic protocols. Then I hope you enjoy them, Sarah said. Because they were all built by humans who bled and sweated and died to make them livable. And I hope that every time you walk through our corridors and eat food grown in our gardens, you remember that you stole them from people whose only crime was wanting a future for their children. She left before anyone could respond. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. In the corridor outside, Sarah finally allowed herself to show emotion. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. Her staff gathered around her, looking to her for guidance, for hope, for anything that might make this catastrophe seem less final. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez was waiting for her at the end of the corridor. He was a tall man with gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in space. He had commanded the human defense fleet for 15 years. He took one look at Sarah's face and knew everything. That bad? He asked quietly. Worse, Sarah said. Total exile. 50 years to evacuate everything beyond Sol system. Trade embargo. Communication blackout. They want us dead, Marcus. They just don't have the courage to kill us directly. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders and looked Sarah directly in the eyes. Then we do not die, he said simply. We adapt. We survive. And then we make them sorry they ever underestimated us. How? Sarah asked. How do we survive this? They control all the trade routes. They control the FTL network. They have resources and technology that we can barely imagine. What do we have? We have something they lost a long time ago, Marcus said. We have the will to fight. We have innovation born of necessity. We have the knowledge that we are starting from the bottom, which means we have nowhere to go but up. He paused. And we have Dr. Okoye, Sarah blinked. Amara, what does she have to do with this? She has been working on something. A project that the Council does not know about. Alternative FTL technology that does not rely on their network. She thinks she is close to a breakthrough. Marcus glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I was not supposed to tell anyone yet, but I think you need to know. We are not helpless, Sarah. We have options. For the first time since entering that terrible chamber, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. How long until she has something working? She says 10 years. Maybe less if we dedicate resources to it. 10 years, Sarah repeated. And then what? Even if we have independent FTL, what do we do with it? The council will still be larger, stronger, more advanced. Then we spend the next 50 years getting stronger, Marcus said. In secret, if necessary. We use the time they have given us to prepare. They think they are forcing us into extinction. Instead, they are giving us time to become something new, something better, something they cannot ignore or dismiss. Sarah looked at him carefully. You are planning something. Something beyond just surviving. Marcus smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. I am planning to make sure that humanity never kneels to anyone again. I am planning to show the galaxy that exiling us was the biggest mistake they ever made. He leaned closer. I am planning to take some of the fleet and disappear. The outer colonies do not need to be abandoned if the council never finds them. We can go dark, build in secret, prepare. That is mutiny, Sarah said softly. Technically, I should arrest you right now. Are you going to? Marcus asked. Sarah thought about it. She thought about her sister on New Harmony. She thought about all the humans who would lose everything because of today's verdict. She thought about Jothik's smug face and his absolute certainty that humanity would crumble. No, she finally said. I am not going to arrest you. Instead, I'm going to go back to Earth and convince the government to officially condemn your actions. I'm going to make a big show of hunting for you, and I'm going to make sure that no one ever finds you until you are ready to be found. Marcus nodded slowly. It might take decades. You might not live to see the payoff. I do not care, Sarah said. As long as humanity survives, that is enough. As long as we get our chance to show them what we are really capable of, I can die happy. She held out her hand. Good luck, Admiral. Give them hell. Marcus shook her hand firmly. Count on it, Ambassador. And in 50 years, when we are ready, we are going to remind the Galactic Council why they should have killed us when they had the chance. They parted ways there in the corridor. Sarah headed toward the diplomatic shuttle that would take her back to Earth. Marcus headed toward the military docks where his fleet waited. Neither of them looked back. They both knew that everything had changed. The comfortable era of humanity cautiously expanding into a galaxy that tolerated them was over. The age of human exile had begun, and with it the seeds of something far more dangerous were planted. The Galactic Council had tried to eliminate a competitor. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare. They had given humanity a reason to become stronger, smarter, and more determined than any species in galactic history. They had made the mistake of backing humans into a corner, and like all prey animals turned predators, humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The first ships began arriving back at Sol System within 6 months of the Council's verdict. They came in waves, hundreds at a time, carrying families who had packed everything they could fit into cargo holds. People who had been born on distant worlds were now seeing Earth for the first time. Children cried. Adults tried to stay strong but often failed. The largest human migration in history was not one of hope and exploration, but of defeat and exile. Dr. Amara Okoye watched the incoming ships from her lab on Luna Station. She had not left the moon in 8 months. She could not afford to. Her work was too important, too urgent, too necessary for humanity's survival. While politicians on Earth argued about how to handle the crisis, while military leaders planned defensive positions around Sol System, Amara worked 18-hour days trying to crack the problem that would determine humanity's future. She was trying to break the laws of physics, or at least to find a way around them that did not rely on the Galactic Council's technology. The Council's FTL network used something they called null space corridors. These were artificially maintained tunnels through higher dimensions that allowed ships to travel faster than light. The Council had built this network over thousands of years, and they controlled every access point. Now that humanity was cut off, human ships were limited to slower than light travel. A journey that once took days now took decades. It was not sustainable. Run the simulation again, Amara said to her assistant, a young man named Chen Wei who had been her best student before the exile. Adjust the quantum field parameters by 3%. The holographic display in front of them lit up with complex mathematical equations. Amara watched as virtual particles interacted in ways that should not be possible according to standard physics. The simulation ran for 30 seconds, then collapsed into chaos. Failure, Wei said quietly. Same as the last 200 attempts. The field destabilizes as soon as we try to scale it up to ship-sized dimensions. Amara rubbed her eyes. She had not slept properly in days. There has to be a way. The Council's technology proves that FTL is possible. We just need to find a different path to the same destination. Maybe we are thinking about this wrong, Wei suggested. The Council uses null space because they have massive power generation capabilities. We do not. But what if we do not need null space at all? What if there is another way to achieve FTL that requires less power? Like what? Amara asked, but she was already thinking. Wei had a gift for lateral thinking, for seeing problems from unexpected angles. Slip space, Wei said, warming to his idea. What if instead of forcing our way through higher dimensions, we slip between the cracks in normal space? Quantum mechanics tells us that particles can exist in multiple places at once until observed. What if we could make a ship do the same thing? Amara stared at him. The idea was insane. It violated dozens of established principles, but it was also brilliant. Show me the math, she said. They worked through the night. By morning, they had the outline of a theory that might possibly, with a lot of luck and innovation, allow humanity to travel faster than light without using the Council's network. It would take years to test. It might not work at all, but it was hope. And hope was the most valuable resource humanity had right now. While Amara worked on her impossible project, the rest of humanity struggled to adapt to their new reality. Earth had not been prepared to absorb 3 billion returning colonists. Housing shortages became critical. Food production strained to meet demand. The economy, already damaged by the loss of trade with alien species, collapsed into recession. Unemployment soared. Crime rates jumped. Political extremists on both sides gained followers, some calling for surrender and acceptance, others calling for immediate war against the Council. It was the closest humanity had come to self-destruction since the nuclear standoffs of the 20th century. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's Secretary of State, worked desperately to hold society together. She gave speeches calling for unity. She organized massive public works projects to employ the returning colonists. She met with world leaders and convinced them to share resources instead of hoarding them. She barely slept, barely ate, and aged 10 years in the first two. But she also did something else, something secret. She coordinated with Admiral Rodriguez and his remnant fleet. Marcus had kept his promise. 2 weeks after the Council's verdict, he had taken 40 ships and simply vanished. The official story was that he had gone rogue, that he had stolen military vessels and fled like a criminal. Sarah had publicly condemned him. She had called him a traitor. She had promised that he would be brought to justice. In reality, she sent him encrypted messages every month, passing along intelligence, resources, and volunteers. Young men and women who wanted to fight rather than surrender quietly slipped away from Earth and somehow found their way to Marcus's hidden fleet. Supply ships disappeared from inventories. Weapons manufacturing facilities reported mysterious accounting errors. All of it flowed out to Marcus and his growing armada. Marcus had taken his fleet to the far edges of human space, to systems that the Council had never bothered to chart carefully. There in the darkness between stars, he built secret bases. He trained crews in guerrilla tactics. He prepared for a war that might not come for decades, and he kept the outer colonies alive. New Harmony, Proxima Station, Kepler's Hope, and a dozen other human worlds were supposed to be evacuated. But when Council inspection teams arrived to verify compliance, they found abandoned facilities and empty domes. They assumed humanity had obeyed the exile order. They did not know that the colonists had simply moved underground, or that they maintained contact with Marcus's fleet, or that they continued mining resources and building infrastructure in complete secret. The Council had won the diplomatic battle, but they were losing the intelligence war without even knowing they were in one. 5 years after the exile, Dr. Okoye achieved her first successful test. A probe using her experimental slip space drive successfully traveled 1 light year in 3 hours. It had taken her team 5 years of failures, of dead ends, of watching colleagues give up and quit. But they had done it. Humanity now had a path forward. When Sarah received the news, she wept. It was the first time she had cried since the day of the verdict. How long until you can scale it up to a ship? Sarah asked Amara during a secure call. 2 years for a prototype, 5 years for mass production, 10 years before we could have a fleet. Amara looked exhausted but triumphant. But Sarah, there is something else. Something I discovered while working on the slip space equations. What is it? The Council's null space network. I have been studying their public technical documents, trying to understand how their system works so we could avoid it. And I found something. A vulnerability, a massive flaw in their network architecture that they either do not know about or think is impossible to exploit. Sarah leaned forward.
What kind of vulnerability?
The kind that could let us shut down their entire FTL network. Or better yet, let us take it over. Amara's smile was fierce. They built their network assuming no one else had advanced quantum mathematics, but we do. And we can see things in their system that they cannot. Do not do anything yet, Sarah warned. We are not ready. We need at least another decade, maybe 2, before we can risk open conflict. I know, Amara said. I am just saying that when the time comes, we will have options. They think they have all the power because they control the network. They are wrong. 10 years after the exile, humanity had stabilized. The crisis had passed. People had adapted to the new reality. Earth and the other inner system worlds were crowded but functional. A new generation of children was growing up with stories about the injustice of the exile, raised to be stronger and smarter than their parents. Schools emphasized science and engineering. Military recruitment was at an all-time high. Humanity was not just surviving anymore. They were preparing. Marcus's remnant fleet had grown from 40 ships to 10,000. Some were military vessels, but most were civilian ships converted to military purposes, mining barges with weapons bolted to their hulls, colony transports refitted as troop carriers, even luxury yachts turned into fast attack craft. It was not a pretty fleet, but it was large, experienced, and angry, and Marcus had trained them well. The key to Marcus's strategy was information. He had spent years cultivating contacts among alien species that were not part of the Council's inner circle. One species in particular, the Kithra, had become valuable allies. The Kithra were refugees from a war that the Council had failed to prevent. They had no love for the Council, and were happy to share intelligence with humanity. Through the Kithra, Marcus learned about Council military deployments. He learned about their economic troubles. He learned about the growing dissatisfaction among younger species who were tired of the Council's rigid control. Most importantly, he learned that the Council was not the unified force they pretended to be. Internal politics and old grudges divided them. Some species were barely on speaking terms with each other. They are vulnerable, Marcus told his senior officers during a strategy meeting on his flagship, the Defiance. They have been comfortable for so long that they have forgotten how to actually fight. Their fleets are mostly for show. Their tactics are outdated. They rely on their technology advantage, but that gap is closing. What about the Varine? Asked Commander Lisa Park, his second-in-command. They are the ones who pushed hardest for our exile. They will not just let us come back. The Varine are insects, Marcus said bluntly, literally and strategically. They think in terms of hive tactics, overwhelming numbers, rigid hierarchy. We can outthink them. We can outmaneuver them. We can beat them. When do we move? Park asked. Not yet, Marcus said. We have 40 years until the exile deadline. We use that time. We build more ships. We train more crews. We perfect our tactics. And when the 50th year arrives, we do not ask permission to come back. We take our place in the galaxy by force and we dare them to stop us. 20 years after the exile, something unexpected happened. A young Varine officer named Kelvas defected to humanity. He arrived in a stolen scout ship at one of Marcus's hidden bases and requested asylum. When questioned about why he had abandoned his people, Kelvas said something that gave Marcus hope. Because you were right, Kelvas said through his translator. What the Council did to humanity was wrong. I have studied your species. You were not aggressive. You were just successful. And we punished you for it because we were afraid of what you might become. He paused. I am not the only one who thinks this. There are others from many species who believe the exile was a mistake. We are just afraid to speak up. Why are you speaking up now? Marcus asked. Because I have been watching. I know about your hidden fleet. I know about your secret colonies. And I know that you are planning something. When you make your move, you will need allies. You will need people who know how the Council operates from the inside. I want to help. Marcus studied the young alien carefully. It could be a trap. It could be a Council intelligence operation. But his instinct said otherwise. Kelvas seemed genuine. More than that, he seemed desperate to be on the right side of history. All right, Marcus said finally. You can stay, but you will be watched. You will be tested, and if you betray us, you will regret it. I understand, Kelvas said. I only ask one thing in return. When you win because I believe you will win, please do not destroy my people. We are not all like Galactic. Some of us just want to live in peace. We are not conquerors, Marcus said. We just want what was taken from us. If your people stay out of our way, we will not harm them. It was a promise Marcus intended to keep. Despite everything the council had done, despite the years of suffering they had caused, Marcus did not want genocide. He wanted justice. He wanted humanity to reclaim its place in the galaxy, but he did not want to become the monsters the council had claimed they were. 30 years after the exile, Dr. Okoye's slip-space drives were in mass production. Human ships could now travel faster than anything in the council's fleet. They could appear and disappear without using the council's network, making them almost impossible to track. Humanity's technological disadvantage had become an advantage. Isolation had forced innovation. 40 years after the exile, everything was ready. The remnant fleet numbered 10,000 ships. Earth's defenses were stronger than ever. Dr. Okoye had a plan to take control of the Council's FTL network. Ambassador Chen had identified potential allies among the Council species. Young humans who had grown up during the exile were now officers, scientists, and diplomats, all burning with determination to prove humanity's worth. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the star charts. 10 more years until the deadline. 10 more years, and then they would show the galaxy what humanity had become during their exile. They would show the Council that trying to destroy humanity had only made them stronger. They would prove that humans did not just survive, they thrived. "Begin Operation Phoenix," Marcus ordered. "Send word to all fleet elements. In 10 years we go home, and nothing will stop us." Year 48 of the exile. The galaxy had mostly forgotten about humanity. Earth was a distant memory, a cautionary tale told to younger species about knowing their place in the galactic order. The former human colonies were now populated by Council-approved species. The Vereen had taken the most valuable worlds, naturally. New Harmony was now a Vereen industrial center. Proxima Station housed a Quelon administrative hub. The mining operations in the outer reaches belonged to the Dalmari Jatik had been promoted to High Counselor of the Vereen hegemony. He stood in his office on Unity Prime Station and looked out at the stars with satisfaction. The human problem had been solved. Their dangerous expansion had been stopped. The galaxy was stable again, ordered, controlled. Everything as it should be. He did not know that in 47 different star systems human ships were moving into position. He did not know that the empty colonies his people occupied had never truly been empty. He did not know that the slaves and workers brought in from other species included hundreds of deep-cover human operatives. He did not know that humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. He did not know, but he was about to learn. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez was 74 years old now. His hair was completely white. His hands shook slightly when he was tired. But his mind was sharp as ever, and his determination had only grown stronger with age. He stood on the bridge of the Defiance, surrounded by officers young enough to be his grandchildren, and prepared to give the order that would change galactic history. "All ships report ready, sir," Commander Park said. She was 60 herself now, but still as capable as the day she had joined the remnant fleet. "We have confirmation from all 47 strike teams. They are in position and awaiting your command." Marcus looked at the tactical display. 10,000 ships spread across half the galaxy, all hidden from Council sensors by Dr. Okoye's slip-space technology. 47 Council military outposts about to be hit simultaneously. Communication hubs, supply depots, patrol bases. All targeted for capture rather than destruction. This was not about killing. This was about sending a message. "Dr. Okoye," Marcus said, turning to the elderly scientist who stood at a specialized console. She was in her 80s now, but she had insisted on being here for this moment. "Are you ready to take down their network?" "I have been ready for 30 years, Amara said with a slight smile. "The Council's FTL network is about to become humanity's FTL network. They will not even know what hit them until it is too late." "Ambassador Chen," Marcus said, looking at the communication screen where Sarah's face appeared. She was broadcasting from Earth, looking older but no less determined. "Are you ready to make the announcement?" "I have my speech prepared," Sarah said. "As soon as you begin the strikes, I will broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. They need to know why we are doing this. They need to understand that this is not aggression. This is justice." Marcus took a deep breath. 50 years of preparation came down to this moment. 50 years of sacrifice, of loss, of humanity suffering in silence while they built the strength to return. He thought about all the people who had died during the exile, who had never lived to see this day. He thought about his own son, who had been killed in an accident on a colony ship during the early evacuation. This was for them. This was for everyone the Council had wronged. All ships, Marcus said clearly, execute Operation Homecoming. Show them what humanity has become. Across the galaxy, 10,000 ships dropped out of slip space at exactly the same moment. They appeared without warning, bypassing every sensor and defense system the Council had. Within minutes, 47 military outposts were under siege. Human forces moved with precision and overwhelming speed. They had practiced these maneuvers thousands of times. Every officer knew their role. Every ship knew its position. The Battle of Proxima Reach was the most critical engagement. A Vereen armada of 300 ships was stationed there, guarding what had once been human territory. Marcus had assigned 2,000 ships to this battle, and they came in from multiple vectors, using tactics that the Vereen had never seen before. The Vereen tried to respond with their standard hive tactics, moving in coordinated swarms. But human ships broke apart into small, independent units that struck from unexpected angles. When the Vereen concentrated their forces to crush one group, 3 more groups would attack from behind. When they tried to fall back to defensive positions, human ships would slip space jump directly into their retreat path. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was everything Marcus had trained his people to do. Commander Park led the fighter squadrons personally. Her ship, the Retribution, danced through Vereen formations like a predator among prey. She targeted their command ships specifically, cutting off communication and coordination. Without their rigid command structure, Vereen forces became confused and disorganized. Enemy flagship is trying to escape, her tactical officer reported. They are heading for the null space corridor. Cut them off, Park ordered. I want that ship captured, not destroyed. We need prisoners who can tell us about Council fleet deployments. 3 human destroyers slip-spaced ahead of the Vereen flagship and blocked its escape route. The flagship tried to fight, but it was designed for fleet actions, not close combat. Within an hour, human boarding teams had taken control. The Vereen commander surrendered rather than see his entire crew killed in pointless resistance. At the same time, Dr. Okoye executed her part of the plan. From her console aboard the Defiance, she sent carefully crafted quantum signals into the Council's FTL network. These signals exploited the vulnerability she had discovered decades earlier. The network's control systems, designed by species that did not fully understand quantum mechanics at humanity's level, could not distinguish her signals from legitimate system commands. Within minutes, she had administrative access to the entire network. She could see every ship using the null space corridors. She could see every communication passing through the system. And most importantly, she could control who had access and who did not. I am shutting down all Vereen access to the network, Amara announced. They are now effectively stranded wherever they are. Any Vereen ship currently in null space will be forcibly ejected at their next junction point. Marcus smiled. And the rest of the Council species? Still have access for now, Amara said. We want them to see what is happening. We want them to know that we could shut them down too if we wanted. Fear and uncertainty are weapons just as powerful as guns. On Unity Prime Station, Galactic stared at the emergency reports flooding his screens with growing horror. 47 outposts under attack. 300 ships defeated at Proxima Reach. The FTL network compromised. And now, a message broadcasting to every world in the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen's face appeared on every public screen, every communication device, every display that could receive transmissions. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of 50 years of injustice. People of the galaxy, Sarah began. 50 years ago, the Galactic Council exiled humanity for the crime of being successful. They claimed we were aggressive. They claimed we were dangerous. They claimed we did not deserve a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. Today we return, not to ask permission, but to reclaim what was always ours. Galactic tried to shut down the broadcast, but his systems would not respond. The humans had taken over the communication networks, too. He was forced to watch and listen as this human woman exposed everything. The Council told you they were maintaining peace and order, Sarah continued. But we have evidence of what they really are. We have documents showing 300 years of corruption. We have recordings of Council members dividing up resources among themselves. We have proof that they have deliberately suppressed technological advancement across the galaxy to maintain their own power. New screens appeared beside Sarah's face, showing document after document, recording after recording. The evidence was overwhelming. Council members taking bribes, secret agreements to fix prices on essential resources, plans to crush any species that became too successful or independent, all of it laid bare for the galaxy to see. The Council did not exile us to protect the galaxy, Sarah said. They exiled us because we represented a threat to their control, because we were innovating too quickly, because we were proving that their way was not the only way. They wanted us to die quietly so no other species would get similar ideas. On dozens of worlds, people watched in shock. Some had suspected Council corruption, but seeing it proven was different. Others had never questioned the Council's authority and were now forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Young species, the ones who had joined the Galactic community in the last few centuries, began asking why they should continue following a system that was so clearly broken. Humanity spent 50 years in exile, Sarah said. We suffered. We struggled. We lost millions of people to the hardships imposed on us. But we did not die. We adapted. We innovated. We became stronger. And now we return not as the species the Council tried to destroy, but as something far more dangerous. We return as a species that knows the truth about the galaxy's supposed leaders. Marcus watched the broadcast from his bridge and felt pride surge through him. Sarah had nailed it. This was not just about military victory. This was about changing hearts and minds across the galaxy. This was about showing everyone that the Council could be challenged, could be beaten, could be exposed for what they truly were. We did not come back for revenge, Sarah continued. We came back for justice. We came back to free not just ourselves, but all species living under the Council's corrupt rule. We came back to prove that a different way is possible. A galaxy based on merit rather than ancient power structures. A galaxy based on innovation rather than stagnation. A galaxy where any species, regardless of age or influence, has the right to thrive. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Council will call this an act of war. They will tell you we are the aggressors, the criminals, the threat to galactic peace. But ask yourselves this. Who exiled an entire species for the crime of being successful? Who hoarded technology and resources while others struggled? Who built a system designed to keep themselves powerful and everyone else subservient? We are not your enemy. The Council is. The broadcast ended. For a moment, the galaxy was silent, processing what they had just witnessed. Then the chaos began. On Unity Prime Station, Council members from different species began arguing, accusing each other, demanding explanations. On colony worlds, protests erupted as people demanded answers from their governments. On military bases, officers questioned whether they should continue taking orders from Council leadership. And in the former human colonies, something even more dramatic happened. The workers and slaves who had been brought in to replace humanity rose up in rebellion. Thousands of them revealed themselves as human operatives who had been living undercover for decades. They seized control of facilities, disabled defensive systems, and opened the gates for human military forces to reclaim their former homes. On New Harmony, the Vereen governor was caught completely by surprise when his entire security force turned out to be humans in disguise. They had worked for him for years, always reliable, always obedient. Now they arrested him and took control of the planet's defense grid without firing a single shot. Marcus watched the reports coming in and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Every single objective had been achieved. The Council's military forces were in disarray. Their communication network was compromised. Their corruption was exposed. And most importantly, humanity had proven they were not the primitive species the Council had dismissed 50 years ago. Sir, we are receiving surrender offers from 17 of the 47 outposts, Commander Park reported. The others are still fighting, but their resistance is weakening. Accept all surrenders, Marcus ordered. I want prisoners treated with respect and dignity. We are not savages. We are professionals who happen to be very, very good at our jobs. What about the Vereen? Park asked. They are requesting immediate talks. Tell them we will talk when Jothic personally comes to negotiate, Marcus said. I want him to look me in the eye and admit what he did was wrong. On Earth, Sarah Chen collapsed into her chair after the broadcast ended. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but triumphant. They had done it. After 50 years of suffering and planning, they had actually done it. Humanity was back, and this time, no one would force them into exile ever again. Her assistant brought her a message that had just arrived. It was from one of the council species, the Kithra. They were formally requesting to meet with human leadership to discuss an alliance. 2 other species had sent similar requests. The council was already fracturing just as they had hoped. "It is working," Sarah said softly. "Everything we planned, everything we sacrificed for it is actually working." In his office on Unity Prime, Galactic finally accepted the truth. The humans had won. Not through brute force, though they had proven themselves capable of that. Not through superior technology, though they had achieved that too. They had won through patience, through planning, through being smarter and more determined than anyone had given them credit for. He had spent 50 years believing humanity would fade away. Instead, they had used that time to become the most dangerous force in the galaxy, and now they were offering him a choice. Negotiate or be destroyed. Submit or be replaced. Accept justice or face consequences. For the first time in his long life, Galactic felt fear. Not fear of death, but fear of being remembered as the leader who brought about his species' downfall. He had thought exiling humanity would secure his legacy. Instead, it might destroy everything his people had built. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "This is High Counselor Galactic. I am prepared to discuss terms." The meeting took place on neutral ground, a small space station in unclaimed territory between human and council space. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez arrived with a security detail and a diplomatic team. Galactic came with his own advisors, looking diminished somehow, his chitinous armor lacking its usual gleam. The years had not been kind to him, and recent events had aged him further. They sat across from each other in a conference room designed for multi-species interaction. The air was tense. Marcus studied the Vereen counselor carefully, remembering every detail of that day 50 years ago when humanity had been exiled. This creature had smiled while condemning billions of humans to suffering and possible extinction. Now he looked nervous, uncertain, defeated. "You wanted to talk," Marcus said simply. "So talk." Galactic's mandibles clicked nervously. "Your attack was unexpected. Your capabilities exceed our projections. The Council wishes to negotiate a ceasefire." "The Council wishes," Marcus repeated slowly. "Not you personally. You are just here as a messenger?" "I speak for the Vereen hegemony and for the majority faction within the Council," Galactic said stiffly. "The majority faction," Marcus said. "Interesting. So the Council is divided?" Galactic hesitated, and Marcus knew he had hit on something important. The Council was fracturing. The unity they had shown 50 years ago was breaking apart under pressure. "There are disagreements about how to handle the current situation," Galactic admitted carefully. "Some species believe we should negotiate. Others want to mobilize for total war, and some are reconsidering their membership in the Council entirely." "Which species are reconsidering their membership?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "The Kithra have already announced they are leaving the Council," one of Galactic's advisors said quietly. "The Cerivan and Dalmari are also considering it. They claim that recent revelations about Council activities have made continued membership untenable." Marcus nodded. Sarah's broadcast had done its job. The evidence of corruption had been too overwhelming for some species to ignore. The Council's carefully maintained image of wise, benevolent leadership had been shattered. Now they were scrambling to hold together an alliance that was coming apart at the seams. "What does the Vereen hegemony want from this negotiation?" Marcus asked. "A return to the status quo," Galactic said. "Humanity can keep Sol System and perhaps a few nearby colonies. In exchange, you cease all military operations and acknowledge Council authority over galactic affairs." Marcus laughed. It was a harsh sound, devoid of humor. "You exile us, try to destroy us, fail completely, and now you want us to pretend it never happened. You want us to accept subordinate status after we have proven ourselves your equals or superiors? No, that deal is insulting. Then what do you want?" Galactic demanded, his voice rising. "Total war? The destruction of the Council? Do you want to conquer the galaxy?" "We want what we always wanted," Marcus said coldly. "To be left alone to build our civilization in peace. We want our colonies back, the ones you stole from us. We want access to galactic trade and communication networks on equal terms. We want a say in galactic governance proportional to our population and capabilities. And most importantly, we want a guarantee that no species will ever be exiled again for the crime of being successful. That is asking for a complete restructuring of galactic governance." Galactic's advisor protested. Yes, Marcus agreed. Because the current system is broken. You proved that when you exiled us. The Council is not a governing body. It is a cartel designed to maintain the power of ancient species at the expense of everyone else. That needs to end. The other species will never accept this, Galactic said. You are demanding that we give up advantages we have held for millennia. Then there will be war, Marcus said simply. And based on recent events, I like our chances. You had every advantage. You had superior numbers, established infrastructure, control of all trade routes, and we still beat you in every engagement. What makes you think longer conflict will go better for you? Before Galactic could respond, the door to the conference room opened. Ambassador Sarah Chen entered, accompanied by representatives from 3 other species. Marcus recognized them immediately: the Kithra, the Sarivan, and the Dalmari, the species that were abandoning the Council. I apologize for the interruption, Sarah said smoothly, but I thought Councillor Galactic should hear this directly. These 3 species have agreed to form an alliance with humanity. We are establishing a new galactic organization based on principles of equality, free trade, and technological sharing. Any species is welcome to join regardless of age or previous affiliation. Galactic stared at her in horror. You are trying to destroy the Council. No, Sarah said. We are offering an alternative. The Council can continue to exist if it wants, but it will no longer have a monopoly on galactic governance. Species will have a choice. They can stay with the old system, or they can join us in building something new. The Kithra representative, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish, spoke through its translator. The Council had 50 years to reform itself. Instead, it became more corrupt, more rigid, more concerned with maintaining power than serving the galaxy. Humanity showed us that change is possible. They were exiled and came back stronger. They were isolated and became more innovative. They were written off as primitive and proved themselves advanced. They are the future. The Council is the past. We are not abandoning our former colleagues, the Sarivan representative added. She looked like a crystalline sculpture, light refracting through her translucent body. We are simply refusing to be part of a system that has betrayed its own principles. Any Council species that wishes to join our new alliance is welcome. We hold no grudges. We seek only justice and fairness. Galactic looked around the room, realizing that he was losing this negotiation badly. The Council's unity was broken. Their authority was being challenged openly, and the humans, the species he had tried to destroy, were now dictating terms. What happens to the Vereen if we do not join your alliance? Galactic asked quietly. Nothing, Marcus said. You can continue as you were, but you will not have access to our new trade network. You will not benefit from our technological innovations. You will not have the same influence you once did.
The galaxy is changing, Counselor.
You can change with it or you can be left behind. This is blackmail, Galactic protested. No, Sarah corrected. Blackmail would be threatening to destroy you if you do not comply. We are not threatening anything. We are simply building a new system and inviting others to join. You can participate or not. That is your choice. But understand that isolation is what you imposed on us and we survived it. Can you say the same? The meeting ended without resolution. Galactic and his delegation left to consult with other Council members. Marcus and Sarah met with their new allies to begin planning the structure of their alternative organization. They decided to call it the Galactic Commonwealth, emphasizing equality and shared governance. Over the next 2 years, the political landscape of the galaxy transformed completely. 4 more species left the Council to join the Commonwealth. The Council attempted to punish these defections by cutting off trade access, but humanity's slipspace technology made such blockades meaningless. Human ships could bypass Council checkpoints entirely, establishing direct trade relationships with any world that wanted them. The economic impact was immediate and devastating for the Council. Humanity offered better trade terms than the Council ever had. They shared technology instead of hoarding it. They established fair pricing instead of price fixing. Within a year, even species that remained loyal to the Council were quietly trading with Commonwealth members because the deals were simply too good to refuse. But the Council was not accepting defeat quietly. The Vereen in particular refused to acknowledge the new reality. Galactic convinced 5 other Council species to join him in a hardline faction. They began mobilizing military forces, preparing for a confrontation that would either restore Council authority or destroy it completely. Ambassador Chen saw the reports of military buildup and knew that the situation was reaching a crisis point. There would be one final confrontation, one last chance for the Council to accept change peacefully, or to force humanity to prove their superiority through overwhelming military victory. She sent a message to Galactic, bypassing official channels to speak to him directly. "Counselor, this does not have to end in war. Your people are not our enemies. It is the system that is broken, not the species within it. Join us, help us build something better. Your experience and knowledge would be valuable in the Commonwealth. We hold no grudges against the Varine people for the actions of their leaders." Galactic's response was bitter. "You offer me a place in your new order, but only if I abandon everything my people have built. You ask me to admit that our way was wrong, that we were wrong. I cannot do that. I will not do that." "Then you choose war," Sarah said sadly, "and many will die because of pride and stubbornness." "Better to die with honor than live in submission," Galactic replied. Meanwhile, Dr. Amara Okoye was working on something that would make the coming conflict much shorter than anyone expected. She had spent 2 years analyzing the Council's military technology, looking for weaknesses to exploit. She found something remarkable. The Council species had become so dependent on their established technology that they had stopped innovating. Their weapons, their shields, their tactics were all centuries old, refined but not fundamentally changed. Humanity, forced to innovate or die during the exile, had developed completely different approaches to space combat. Their weapons were more efficient. Their shields were more adaptive. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable. But Amara discovered something even more useful. The Council ships all used the same basic power generation system, and that system had a vulnerability. "If we hit their power cores with a specific electromagnetic pulse," Amara explained to Marcus during a strategy session, "we can shut down their ships without destroying them. They will be dead in space, crew unharmed but completely helpless. We can win battles without firing a shot." "How many ships can you equip with this weapon?" Marcus asked. "All of them," Amara said with a smile. "It is not complicated technology. We can retrofit our entire fleet in 3 months." Marcus looked at the tactical displays, studying the Council's military positions. They were building up forces near Unity Prime, clearly preparing for a decisive battle. They expected a conventional war, fleet against fleet, hoping their numerical advantage would offset humanity's technological edge. They were in for a surprise. Commander Park reviewed the battle plans and felt a mix of anticipation and dread. She had spent 50 years preparing for war. She had trained generations of pilots. She had overseen the construction of thousands of ships, and now finally, they would see if all that preparation was enough. "Are you scared?" one of her younger officers asked. "Terrified," Park admitted, "but also confident. We have done everything possible to prepare. We have the better technology, the better tactics, and the better cause. If we cannot win with all those advantages, we do not deserve to win." "What if they surrender?" the officer asked. "What if the Council backs down at the last moment?" "Then we have won without firing a shot, and that would be the best outcome," Park said. "But I do not think Galactic will surrender. He has too much pride. He would rather die than admit he was wrong." She was right. 3 months later, as human engineers finished installing Amara's electromagnetic pulse weapons on every ship in the fleet, Galactic made his move. The Council's hardline faction, 6 species strong, assembled the largest military force seen in centuries. 3,000 ships representing the combined might of species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia gathered near Unity Prime Station. It was intended as a show of force, a demonstration that the Council still had power, still had authority, still deserved respect and obedience. Galactic broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. "Let it be known that the Galactic Council will not tolerate rebellion," he announced. "Humanity and their allies have violated centuries of established law. They have stolen territory, corrupted younger species, and threatened the stability that has kept the galaxy peaceful. We will restore order. We will restore authority, and we will show that the Council remains the ultimate power in this galaxy." Ambassador Chen watched the broadcast and felt sadness rather than anger. Galactic had learned nothing. He still believed that might made right, that age granted authority, that the old ways were the only ways. He was about to learn a hard lesson about the cost of refusing to adapt. "Send our response," Sarah told her communications officer. "Let him know we are coming." Let him prepare, and let the galaxy watch what happens when arrogance meets determination. The Battle of Unity Prime would be remembered as the moment the galaxy changed forever. Two fleets faced each other in the darkness of space. On one side, 3,000 council ships representing millennia of established power and authority. On the other, 8,000 human and Commonwealth ships representing a new vision for the galaxy. Every inhabited world watched through captured broadcasts, waiting to see which vision would prevail. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Defiance, now an old man of 76 but still sharp and determined. He looked at the tactical display showing the Council fleet arrayed in traditional formations. They expected a conventional battle. They expected humanity to charge forward and try to overwhelm them with numbers. They were about to be very disappointed. All ships, maintain position, Marcus ordered calmly. Let them make the first move. I want the galaxy to see clearly who the aggressors are. Across the battlefield, Galactic stood in his command ship, surrounded by the other leaders of the hardline faction. They were confident. Their fleet was powerful. Their ships were battle-tested, and they had the blessing of history on their side. Surely these upstart humans could not stand against the combined might of 6 council species. Advance, Galactic ordered. Show them the power they dare to challenge. The council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of steel and energy moving to crush the rebellion. It was an impressive sight, carefully choreographed to intimidate and overwhelm. They had used this same tactic against dozens of species over the centuries. It had always worked before, but humanity had 50 years to study council tactics. They knew what was coming. They were ready. Wait for it, Marcus said quietly as the council fleet approached. Wait until they are committed. Wait until they cannot easily retreat. The council ships closed to weapons range and opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human formation. But the human ships did not return fire. Instead, they activated their shields and began evasive maneuvers. Ships slipped and dodged, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid most of the incoming fire. The few hits that connected were absorbed by shields more advanced than anything the Council had. They are not fighting back, one of Galactic's advisors said with confusion. Why are they not fighting back? It is a trick, Galactic insisted. They are trying to lure us into a trap. Maintain formation. Increase firepower. The Council fleet intensified their assault, pouring more and more energy into their attacks. They were so focused on their targets that they did not notice human ships slipping into position around them. They did not see the trap closing until it was too late. Now, Marcus said simply. 8,000 human ships activated Dr. Okoye's electromagnetic pulse weapons simultaneously. The space around Unity Prime lit up with invisible energy that passed harmlessly through shields but wreaked havoc on power systems. Within seconds, 3,000 Council ships went dark. Their engines stopped. Their weapons went offline. Their life support switched to emergency backup. They hung in space like dead things, completely helpless. On Galactic's command ship, emergency lights flickered on as the main power failed. Alarms blared. Officers shouted in confusion. The Vereen counselor stared at his dead screens in disbelief. What happened? He demanded. What did they do to us? Unknown weapon, his tactical officer reported. It shut down our power core completely. We are running on emergency batteries only. All weapons offline. All propulsion offline. We are defenseless. Throughout the Council fleet, the same scene repeated 3,000 times. Proud warships that had ruled the galaxy for centuries were now floating debris. Their crews unharmed but completely defeated, and they had been defeated without a single death, without a single ship destroyed. It was the most humiliating military defeat in recorded history. Marcus opened a communication channel to the Council fleet. His face appeared on every emergency screen still functioning in the disabled ships. Attention Council forces. You are defeated. Your weapons are disabled. Your ships are helpless. But you are alive. Your crews are unharmed. We could have destroyed you all. We chose not to. Remember that? He paused, letting that sink in. This is not about conquest. This is not about revenge. This is about showing you that the old ways are over. The Council's monopoly on power is broken. You can accept this peacefully, or we can continue this conflict until you have nothing left. The choice is yours. On Unity Prime Station, the remaining Council members watched in stunned silence. Their military might had been neutralized in seconds. Their most powerful fleet had been defeated without firing a single effective shot. Everything they believed about their superiority, their invincibility, their right to rule, had been proven false. Ambassador Sarah Chen's voice came over the communication systems. Members of the Galactic Council, we are formally requesting your surrender. Not unconditional surrender. Not the humiliating terms you once imposed on us. We want a negotiated peace that respects all species involved. We want to build a new system of governance that serves everyone, not just the ancient and powerful. Will you talk with us? There was a long silence. Then, one by one, Council species began responding. The Quellan announced they would negotiate. The Dalmari, who had been wavering for months, formally declared they were leaving the Council to join the Commonwealth. The Cerivan did the same. Species that had remained neutral began sending messages requesting information about Commonwealth membership. Only Galactic and the Vereen remained defiant. From his disabled command ship, the old counselor broadcast one final message. The Vereen hegemony will never surrender to primitives. We will fight to the last ship, the last warrior, the last breath. We will. His broadcast was cut off as another Vereen ship, this one commanded by the defector Kelvas, moved alongside. Kelvas had spent years with humanity, learning their ways, seeing a different path for his people. Now he led a faction of Vereen who were tired of Galactic's pride destroying their future. High Counselor Galactic, Kelvas said formally, on behalf of the Vereen reform movement, I am placing you under arrest for reckless endangerment of our species. You led us into a war we could not win because of pride. You refused negotiation because of stubbornness. You risked extinction for our entire people because you could not admit you were wrong. This ends now. Vereen soldiers, loyal to Kelvas rather than Galactic, boarded the command ship and took the old counselor into custody. He did not resist. He seemed broken, defeated, aged beyond his years. As they led him away, Galactic looked at the images of human ships surrounding his fleet and finally understood. Humanity had not just defeated them militarily. They had exposed the fundamental weakness of the council system. They had proven that age did not grant wisdom, that tradition did not guarantee correctness, that power built on fear and control was no power at all. The Battle of Unity Prime ended without a single death. 3,000 council ships were eventually towed to safe harbor, their crews released unharmed. The electromagnetic pulse effects were temporary. Within days, the ships would be functional again. But the psychological impact was permanent. The council had been humiliated. Their invincibility had been shattered. Their authority was broken beyond repair. 3 months later, representatives from 47 species gathered on a new station built specifically for the purpose. It was not called Unity Prime. That name belonged to the old order. This station was called Horizon, symbolizing a new beginning. They came to dissolve the Galactic Council and establish the Galactic Commonwealth in its place. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now 79 years old, stood before the assembly and gave the opening address. We gather here not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. The old system is dead. We killed it not with weapons, but by proving it was unnecessary. We showed that cooperation works better than control, that innovation works better than stagnation, that sharing works better than hoarding. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. Some were from species that had fought against humanity. Others were from allies who had stood with them. All were here because they chose to be, because they saw a better future in the Commonwealth than in the old Council. The Commonwealth has 3 founding principles, Sarah continued. First, equality. Every species has 1 vote regardless of age or power. A species that achieved spaceflight last year has the same voice as one that has traveled the stars for 1,000,000 years. Second, transparency. All decisions, all records, all activities of the Commonwealth government will be public. No more secret deals, no more hidden corruption. Third, innovation. We will share technology freely. We will encourage advancement. We will reward creativity and problem solving. The species that contributes the most to the common good will be honored, regardless of how old or young they are. The Assembly voted. 47 species approved the Commonwealth Charter. Only 6 abstained, including the Vereen who were still recovering from internal political upheaval. The Galactic Council officially dissolved itself. Some of its former members joined the Commonwealth immediately. Others chose to remain independent but signed trade and mutual defense agreements. A few species, primarily those farthest from human space, chose to wait and watch before committing. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez retired after the vote, finally able to rest after 50 years of preparation and conflict. He moved to a small colony on Proxima Centauri. The first world humans had colonized outside Sol system centuries ago. He spent his remaining years writing his memoirs, teaching at the local university, and watching children play in parks that he had helped protect. Commander Lisa Park took over as head of Commonwealth Defense Forces. She oversaw the transformation of human military might from a force built for revenge into one built for protection. She trained a new generation of officers from dozens of species, teaching them human tactics and philosophy, while learning from their unique perspectives. Dr. Amara Okoye received the first Commonwealth Medal of Innovation for her development of slip space technology and the electromagnetic pulse weapon that had won the final battle without bloodshed. She continued working until her death at 93, always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Her final project was a new form of power generation that would make energy practically free for any world in the Commonwealth. The Vereen underwent a political revolution. Kelvis became the new leader of the hegemony after free elections, the first in Vereen history. He formally apologized to humanity for the exile and requested Commonwealth membership. The application was approved unanimously. The Vereen proved to be valuable members, their organizational skills and work ethic contributing greatly to Commonwealth projects. As for Jathic, he lived out his days in a comfortable imprisonment on a neutral world. He was not executed. He was not tortured. He was simply kept away from power, given time to think about his choices and their consequences. Visitors noted that he spent his final years watching broadcasts from Commonwealth worlds, seeing the prosperity and peace that could have existed 50 years earlier if he had chosen cooperation over confrontation. 5 years after the Battle of Unity Prime, the Commonwealth had grown to 80 member species. Trade flourished. Technology advanced at rates not seen in millennia. New worlds were colonized under fair agreements that respected all parties. The galaxy, which had been stagnant under council rule, was now dynamic and growing. Sarah Chen stepped down as Commonwealth Secretary General, passing leadership to a younger human named James Okafor. At her retirement ceremony, representatives from every member species came to honor her. She had lived to see humanity go from exiled outcasts to respected leaders. She had watched the galaxy transform from a place of rigid hierarchy to one of opportunity and growth. "I am often asked if I hate the Council for what they did to us," Sarah said in her final speech. "The truth is, I do not. They gave us the greatest gift possible, though they did not intend to. They forced us to become stronger. They forced us to innovate. They forced us to prove ourselves. Without the exile, humanity might have become complacent, might have accepted our place as junior members of someone else's system. Instead, we built our own system. We created something better. So thank you, counselors, wherever you are. You tried to destroy us and instead made us great." 25 years after the exile ended, a remarkable scene played out on New Harmony, the world that Sarah's sister had died defending during the evacuation. In a public park built on the ruins of the old council administration building, children of 6 different species played together. A human girl and a young Vereen were building a fort out of blocks. A Kithra child floated nearby offering suggestions. A Dalmari seedling and a Quilon larva competed in some game that involved rolling colorful spheres. An old human woman watched them play, tears streaming down her weathered face. She remembered when this world had been taken from humanity. She remembered the Vereen soldiers who had occupied it. She remembered the anger and hatred that had consumed her for decades. Now she watched children who would grow up never knowing that old division. They would know only cooperation, only friendship, only the possibility of a shared future. That was the true victory. Not the military conquest, not the political transformation, not even the economic prosperity. The real victory was in these children who saw each other as friends rather than enemies, as equals rather than superior and inferior, as fellow travelers in a vast galaxy rather than competing species fighting over scraps. 50 years after the exile began, humanity celebrated Victory Day across all Commonwealth worlds. It was not a celebration of military triumph, though that was part of the story. It was a celebration of survival, of adaptation, of refusing to accept defeat. It was a celebration of everything that made humanity special. Their stubbornness, their creativity, their ability to turn disaster into opportunity. Ambassador Chen, long since retired, gave one final interview on Victory Day. She was 99 years old, her body frail but her mind still sharp. The interviewer asked her what she was most proud of from her long career. "I am proud that we did not become monsters," Sarah said quietly. "We could have. We had every justification for revenge. We could have destroyed the Vereen. We could have enslaved the species that oppressed us. We could have built an empire on the ruins of the Council. Instead, we built something better. We proved that even when humanity is at its lowest point, even when we have every reason to embrace hatred and violence, we can choose a better path. That is what I am most proud of." She died peacefully in her sleep 2 months later, surrounded by family. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every Commonwealth species. Humans and Vereen stood side by side at her grave, united in honoring a woman who had given her life to building a better galaxy. The galaxy she left behind was unrecognizable from the one she had been born into. The rigid hierarchy of the Council was gone, replaced by the fluid cooperation of the Commonwealth. Technology that had been hoarded for centuries was now shared freely. Young species rose to prominence based on merit, rather than waiting millennia for permission. Innovation flourished. Art and culture blossomed as different species learned from each other. The Commonwealth expanded slowly but steadily, always through invitation rather than conquest. By the 50th anniversary of its founding, it included over 200 species and governed a third of the galaxy. The remaining independent species watched carefully, many gradually recognizing that the Commonwealth model worked better than the alternatives. On Earth, in a museum dedicated to the Exiled period, there hung a famous piece of artwork. It showed Admiral Rodriguez's flagship, the Defiance, facing down the Council fleet at the Battle of Unity Prime. The caption read, "They tried to exile humanity to watch us die. Instead, they forced us to become stronger. We did not take the galaxy by force. We won it by showing what free people can achieve." And in a quiet corner of that same museum, there was a small plaque with words that Sarah Chen had spoken on the day of the exile, words that had become the unofficial motto of the Commonwealth. Humans do not surrender. We adapt, we survive, we overcome, and we remember those who wronged us, not to seek revenge, but to ensure we never allow such injustice again. The galaxy had learned that lesson. The hard way, perhaps, but they had learned it. And in learning it, they had become something better than what came before. In a small apartment on Unity Prime Station, now renamed Horizon Station, an elderly Vereen sat watching a documentary about the exile. His name was Galactic, and he had once been the most powerful member of the Galactic Council. Now he was simply a prisoner, who had been granted limited freedom in his final years due to good behavior and deteriorating health. He watched as the documentary showed human ships returning to reclaim their colonies. He watched footage of the Battle of Unity Prime, seeing his own defeat from the outside perspective. He watched interviews with humans who had suffered during the exile, who had lost family members, who had struggled with poverty and desperation. And for the first time in his long life, Galactic truly understood what he had done. A knock came at his door. Galactic shuffled to answer it, his once imposing form now bent with age. Outside stood a human woman in her 60s, dressed in the simple uniform of Commonwealth administration. She looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only curiosity. "High Counselor Galactic?" she asked. "Just Galactic now," he said quietly. "I hold no titles anymore." "What do you want?" "My name is Maya Chen Rodriguez," the woman said. "Sarah Chen was my grandmother. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez was my grandfather. I work as a liaison between former Council species and Commonwealth integration programs. I wanted to meet you before you died." Galactic felt something cold settle in his chest. To gloat? To see the monster who tried to destroy your people? "No," Maya said simply. "To understand. My grandmother always said that enemies are not born. They are made by circumstances and choices. I wanted to understand what circumstances and choices led you to exile humanity. I wanted to see if there was something I could learn that might prevent future conflicts." Galactic stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in. I am old, I am dying, and I have nothing left to lose by being honest." They sat in his small living room. Galactic made tea in the Vereen style, a ritual that helped him organize his thoughts. Then he began to speak, and once he started, he could not stop. He told her about the fear that had driven the Council's decision. Fear that humanity's rapid advancement would upset the careful balance of power. Fear that other young species would be inspired to challenge the status quo. Fear that the comfortable order that had existed for millennia would crumble. We were not evil, Jothic said. We were afraid. And fear makes cowards of us all. We saw your potential, and instead of embracing it, instead of learning from it, we tried to crush it. We told ourselves it was for the good of the galaxy. We convinced ourselves that maintaining order justified any action. But really, we were just protecting our own positions. Why are you telling me this? Maya asked. Because your grandmother was right, Jothic said. In her retirement speech, she said the exile was a gift because it forced you to become stronger. But it was also a lesson about what happens when the powerful try to suppress the ambitious, when the old try to stop the young, when fear guides policy instead of wisdom. He looked at her directly. The Commonwealth will face this same choice someday. A young species will rise that threatens your comfortable position. You will be afraid. You will be tempted to do what we did. When that day comes, remember us. Remember what fear cost us. Choose differently. Maya nodded slowly. I will remember. And I will make sure others remember too. Jothic died 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. At his request, his body was cremated, and his ashes scattered on a Vereen colony world that had been built using Commonwealth cooperation programs. It was a world that would not have existed under the old council system. In death, Jothic became part of the new order he had once fought against. The galaxy continued turning. New species achieved spaceflight and were welcomed into the Commonwealth as equals. Ancient mysteries were explored by mixed-species research teams. Conflicts arose, as they always do, but they were resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than force. The Commonwealth was not perfect. No system created by imperfect beings could be, but it was better than what came before, and it continued improving with each passing generation. On the anniversary of Sarah Chen's death, now observed as Unity Day throughout the Commonwealth, Maya Chen Rodriguez gave a speech at the museum on Maya, Earth. She stood before the painting of the Defiance facing the Council fleet, and told the story of her final meeting with Jothic. My grandmother taught me that the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemies, but in helping them understand why they were wrong, Maya said. Jothic spent the last years of his life understanding. He saw what the galaxy became without the Council's rigid control. He saw Vereen and humans working together, building together, living together, and he realized that the future he feared was actually better than the past he had tried to preserve. She paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Humans, Vereen, Kithra, Dalmari, and dozens of other species, all gathered to remember the woman who had led them through their darkest time to their brightest future. The exile was meant to be humanity's end, Maya concluded. Instead, it became our beginning. Not just for us, but for the entire galaxy. Because we proved that change is possible, that old systems can be replaced with better ones. That defeat can become victory if you refuse to surrender, and most importantly, that the measure of a civilization is not in how it treats the powerful, but in how it treats those it once considered beneath notice. My grandmother used to say that humanity's greatest strength was not our technology, or our weapons, or even our stubbornness. It was our ability to imagine a better future, and then work to make it real. The Council could not imagine a galaxy without their control. We imagined it, built it, and invited them to join us. That is the true lesson of the exile. Not that humans are special or superior, but that anyone can build something better if they have the courage to try. The crowd erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. When it finally died down, Maya added one final thought. Today we celebrate not the end of the Council, but the beginning of the Commonwealth. Not humanity's victory over the Vereen, but our victory together over the systems that divided us. And we remember Sarah Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, Amara Okoye, and all the others who refused to let humanity die quietly. They showed us the way. Now it is our responsibility to keep walking that path, to keep building that better future, for ourselves and for generations yet to come. That night, across hundreds of worlds in the Commonwealth, people looked up at the stars and felt hope instead of fear. They saw not territories to conquer or resources to exploit, but possibilities to explore and wonders to discover. They saw a galaxy that was finally living up to its potential, where any species could rise as high as their abilities and determination could take them. And somewhere in that vast darkness in a small colony on the edge of Commonwealth space, A human child and a Vereen child looked through a telescope at distant galaxies and made plans to explore them together when they grew up. They did not know about the exile. They did not know about the war. They did not know about the hatred that had once divided their species. They only knew that they were friends, that the stars were beautiful and that the future was theirs to shape however they chose. And really, that was all they needed to know. That was the legacy of the exile. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not conquest or domination, but the simple revolutionary idea that everyone deserves a chance to reach for the stars, and that we reach farther together than we ever could alone. The exile had ended. The Commonwealth had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.